Imagine a creature so unassuming, yet so vital, that its very existence shapes the foundation of life as we know it. I give you the earthworm. Often overlooked and underestimated, these tiny characters in the soil hold immense potential for captivating fiction. From the ecological significance as silent heroes of nature to survival, earthworms can add unexpected layers to storytelling. In this episode, we'll dive into the way these humble creatures can wiggle their way into the tapestries of fiction, weaving stories that leave your readers captivated. Welcome to Writing Rule with Allie, the Fiction Writers Weekly inspiration station for real life and lifestyles, from historical to post-apocalyptic, helping you bring your rule stories to life. I'm Allie, and this is episode number 104, Wiggle Room, incorporating earthworms into fiction stories. Stick around to the end to find out all the ways things could possibly go wrong in your story. Now, let's get into this. Earthworms are found on every continent except Antarctica. They play a pivotal role in the production of crops around the world, among many other uses in rural life, giving you a plethora of ways that you can work these little guys into your stories. I know, much to the dismay of every little girl who was chased around the playground with someone dangling a worm at them. I'm just gonna pretend like I wasn't one of those little snotheads who were chasing the girls with them. Let's start with the basics of what they are good for. That isn't a backstory of childhood trauma. Practical uses. Gardening. They help with soil aeration and fertilization. Compost. They are essential in the breakdown of organic waste, transforming it into worm poop, referred to as black gold by many farmers. Eating. Survival situations are the most likely, but some cultures eat them. Feed for chickens. Chickens will grab the worms and run from the other chickens who try to steal it. It literally looks like a chicken version of football, where the goal is to get 3 seconds to swallow the worm before someone steals it. Bird bait. The early bird gets the worm is not just a saying. Leaving worms out on something that isn't dirt, because they will crawl into dirt, can lure birds that your character might be hunting. Dogs and cats eat them. I have seen both happen often, even if the animals are well fed. Fish bait. This is the one that I hated as a kid because it meant trout lines and bobbins, which meant you had to stare at the line for hours and hope the fish were biting. Side note, trout lines are for catfish, and I don't know where the name comes from. The most common on this list is gardening. With earthworms in the garden, the soil will not compact as much. The water will have an easier time absorbing into the dirt, and it will not run off as quickly. Not to mention all the nutrients that the worms will add into the garden. These include nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and humic acid. Humic acid is basically a compound that makes it easier for plants to absorb water and nutrients. Earthworms are great for compost, as they eat and break down organic matter such as scraps, leaves, and lawn clippings. Although please don't let your gardening characters put lawn clippings into the compost, unless they want to grow weeds. All of those grass seeds will sprout in the garden if they do this, which would actually make for some great petty revenge between gardeners, or a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, or even love rivals. There are things that worms love and hate in compost. Remember that they need smaller chunks, or they'll have to wait for it to decompose some first. In the compost, worms love fruit peelings and vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, tea bags, minus the bag, bread, rice, cooked, not dry, leaves, poop from rabbits, cows, goats, chickens, etc., cardboard and paper, straw, untreated sawdust, and eggshells. Worms hate oils because it can suffocate them, garlic and onions, spicy food scraps, dairy, anything, and meat. They do not like to compete with maggots. I think fish bait and animal food are fairly self-explanatory, but did you know that people can eat earthworms? And it is common in real-life survival stories all around the world. Yep. And if you listen to my episode 101, Good Intentions Gone Wrong, when a character gets well-meaning but misleading survival advice, you will know that I have personally eaten earthworms. Okay, I'm going to give you a second to get all the "ew, gross" said. Bluntly put, raw earthworms taste like slimy dirt, and it's just as gross as it sounds. Now, we also stuck them on tiny sticks and roasted them over open fire. When done like this, they can be dipped in ketchup, and I could pretend it was a French fry. If it has been cleaned and roasted, it's not bad, but it's not really good either. Kind of a crunchy bland with a slight dirt tang. Almost like you had dirty hands and you ate a sandwich with it, you'd get some dirt on the sandwich. Now, your character will want to clean the worm out, so to speak, before eating or cooking it. We always laid them out flat and used our finger to squish all the poop from the back end, starting at one end and squish all the way to the other, likely 2 or 3 times to be sure that they got it all. Now, that's my personal experience. A web search says to leave them to eat leaves in a box for 12 hours so that they can get anything toxic out of their system first. Yeah, here's the thing. If your character is in a survival situation, they're hungry now, not 12 hours from now. More importantly, who the heck carries around a box just in case there's a survival situation so they can eat worms? That's exactly no one. There are some good reasons not to eat them raw and clean and cook the earthworms. First, they can carry E. coli. The symptoms usually happen 2 to 8 days after exposure and can clear up in a week. However, there can also be complications and your character could need medical help. The signs and symptoms of E. coli are fatigue, muscle aches, chills, diarrhea, abdominal pain and cramping, nausea and vomiting, low-grade fever. Symptoms that need medical treatment are bloody stools, high fever, dehydration, likely caused by the diarrhea and vomiting. I would also like to point out that in a survival situation, any of these things could make things worse, and in a survival scenario, this could easily become deadly. Next up are parasites. Yep, your worms can have worms. This includes pinworms, heartworms, and roundworms. All of these things can wreak havoc on the human body. Signs and symptoms of parasitic worms in humans are nausea and vomiting, loss of appetite, weight loss, abdominal pain and cramping, diarrhea, fatigue, anemia, worms and stools, aka their poop. You know, that list sounds a whole lot like the one for E. coli, which is why it can be hard to tell what it is without a doctor's help. Lastly, earthworms can eat and contain high levels of heavy metals and other toxins in the soil. This is a big deal if they're near a lead mine. It could also be a big deal after an apocalypse. If there's radiation, they could contain it. If everything just stopped one day, there could be chemicals from a factory that seep into the soil as the containers age and start to leak. This is when you can get creative with. Other apocalyptic ideas are that worms could be a solution to toxins in the soil or other gardening issues. They could be used to bring nutrition back to barren soils. This could help not only humans, but to regrow lost animal habitats. Let's not forget my kids' favorite sci-fi creatures, sandworms. At least I'm pretty sure that's what the first stage of life for the Tremors are in the Tremors series. Although there are historical stories of Mongolian deathworms that lived in the desert, so this is not a new story. There is also the option of alien worms that look like earthworms, but that is unlikely to be in a rural setting. But I wouldn't say it isn't possible, just unlikely. It's far more likely that the earthworms will help solve a mystery. Perhaps they help the time frame of a death. There is also the possibility that they die off because of some chemical someone has been dumping. Perhaps there's a huge boom, and they're the reason that they learned about growth hormones that the bad guys are making, or bad governments are making. With that idea, let's cover the basic worm facts. There are over 2,700 types of earthworms in the world. In ideal habitats, worms can live for between 4 to 8 years, depending on the species of earthworm. They can lay between 1 and a dozen eggs at a time. They will lay between 20 and 40 times a year. This means that a single worm can have hundreds to thousands of babies. Earthworms live on every continent except Antarctica. They thrive in places that have organic matter for them to eat. This includes forests, grasslands, gardens, compost piles, riverbanks, including the areas that are prone to flooding and agricultural land. There are places that are not conducive to their survival. Deserts are hot and dry. Earthworm would not do well there. Areas with permafrost. They are too cold and many lack the organic matter needed for them to survive. Also, certain altitudes can be too rocky and nutrient poor for earthworms, which is interesting to me as I lived in places so rocky that it would take you 20 minutes to dig a 1-foot hole. We used to grow rocks there. And yet, there was a huge worm population, perhaps because it was a forest area and they had plenty of organic matter to eat. I don't know. Now let's talk about how to dig up worms. They could be found in puddles, as almost every little kid can tell you. When I was young, we would go to the river and dig them out about 30 feet from the water where the ground was still damp. I can still remember that every single time we went, my dad would tell us a story. A young man had decided to come down to the river to dig up worms because it was what the fishers said they did. He was digging up a nest of worms, and as he was carrying them out, one of the guys asked if he had gotten any. He said yes, but they kept biting him. That confused everyone. So they asked to see the worm, and he held up a handful of newly hatched copperhead snakes. They could not get the man to the hospital fast enough to save him. My dad would finish with, "So remember, if you find a worm with a mouth, it's not a worm, it's a snake." Worms can also be found under things. Under fallen logs or large stones are good places to look. We used to keep out old rugs or even mattresses outside on the ground and would hose them down with water from time to time. You could always find worms under them. You could often find snakes under them, so be careful. There's also a thing called worm grunting. There are 2 ways to do it. Both are done with sticks of about 2 inches or more in diameter. One is with a stick that has grooves cut into it so that it looks and sounds like a washboard. And the second is with a stick and a large metal file. In an area that is cleared of grass or leaves, the stick is placed into the ground several inches to a foot. For the grooved stick, a second stick will be rubbed up and down the grooves to make a sound. If using the file, it is rubbed across the top of the stick, making a deep grunting or groaning type of sound. This can work, but it is not nearly as fast as the internet makes it out. It can take several minutes to work. Some people believe that it mimics the rain and the worms come up for that. Others say that it mimics moles. I don't know what the correct one is, but if I ever learn how to speak worm, I'll be sure to ask. Fun fact, the longest earthworm ever found was 22 feet, which is 6.7 meters. One quick reminder before we get into all the ways things could possibly go wrong in your story. To help others find my content, pop on over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. Or if you're watching on YouTube, drop me a comment, say hello, and ask a question. This is the best way to help others find my content. And now for everyone's favorite part, what could possibly go wrong in your story? Likely to go wrong. Your character is in the Boy Scouts and cooks worms to eat. He has trouble eating them as he didn't clean them and they taste like dirt. Also likely to go wrong. Your character wants to show off worm calling to his friends because he has seen it on the internet. He doesn't realize that it takes a few minutes and quits too soon. His friends make fun of him, calling him Worm Man. Possible to go wrong. Your character's dog eats worms near an old mine. Unknowingly, the dog gets lead poisoning from the high amounts of lead in the worm. Also possible to go wrong. Your character is in a survival situation and starving. They decide to try to eat raw worms and gag as they have a mouthful of slimy dirt. Unlikely to go wrong. Your character's pet loves eating earthworms. They unknowingly get roundworms. Also unlikely to go wrong. Your character is in a survival situation and eats raw worms. They unknowingly ingest parasites. Improbable, but still technically in the realm of possibilities. Your character is in a survival situation and eats raw worms that survive. A few days later, they start vomiting and having bloody stools. If they don't help fine quickly, this could be deadly. Also improbable, but still technically in the realm of possibilities. Your characters are in the desert, and giant sandworms see them as food. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy wordsmithing!